the Lord of Hosts is kind of more like translated more like the Lord of Armies. But if we're painting a spiritual soldier,
so the word host is an old English word that meant army.
Yes.
It's only in modern English that we have we think we're going to host a tea party, right? My kids will host a tea party. But in that word, the Hebrew is Savaot, is armies.
I saw a note in here that a lot of the people in the Ephesians congregation were Israeli descent. So it's not necessarily new. I mean, I'm sure there's some new, people from out of the covenant into the new one. But so it's kind of, it does make sense that it's not really depicting Roman soldiers, even though Roman soldiers would have been there at the time.
Right.
But so I mean, I'm sure a lot of them have this kind of picture in your head as far as the Hebraic and.
Yeah, I would venture that most people, when they read his letter, would have pictured the priest, not the Roman soldier. Because again, what business would a rabbi have in saying, dress up like a Roman soldier and do these things right after he says it's not a physical battle? So how do you prepare for a spiritual battle? That's what the priest was doing. It was not for physical battle. The Roman soldier was the physical side. And we don't have to pick up that sword and deal with that one. That's not ours. So the spiritual side of things, that we do have to prepare for. The other one, and Gary mentioned this kind of in passing, the Hebrew word in Exodus 28, mitznefet, is the word for turban that Aaron was commanded to wear, right? In 28:40, when it talks about the hat for the sons, mikvaot is a word, when I looked it up, it refers to a spherical shaped head covering that says for glory and for beauty. And this was one of those interesting ones, and I kind of I would caution all of us, right? Came out of Christianity for most of us, and didn't leave all the baggage behind, right? And unfortunately, a lot of rabbinic stuff is kind of built into my matrix after years and years. And then we come into this messianic movement and we hear things like, we have to keep specific commandments. And even Brent has said, there's no commandment to wear a kippah. Not for everybody, but for the priests, right? For the Kohanim.
Junior priests.
Like, okay, that's interesting, right? But if you follow, why did all of the males then start wearing them?
You are royal priesthood,
no temple.
Because of the soldier on the right.
Yeah, because of the guy on the right, all the guys have to start wearing the hat, right? But it's really, when the temple was destroyed, and the priesthood was pretty well destroyed in that process. So the concept of the Zedekah, remembering, right? If you listen, anybody hear Reuben Prager? Has anybody heard Reuben Prager speak? Have you heard his lecture on where the Talit comes from and why? So it used to be, back at that point in time, if you were walking around with tzitzit on, the Romans could literally just kill you on the spot. And so the rabbis said, maybe we ought to preserve life. So you put it on a talit, you stuff it in the bag, and you carry it with you until you get someplace safe, like an underground, a hidden synagogue, prayer house, somewhere where you can go and be safe. And so that you wouldn't forget the commandment, they put the tzitzit on the prayer shawl. You would take it out, you would do your prayers, you would put it back in and be able to go home without getting killed. The problem becomes, it became a tradition to do it that way, right? Not to wear tzitzit, but the tradition became to do it that way. And it doesn't take that long, and we're good at making traditions last, right? When Reuben describes it, he says it's kind of like, yeah?
I don't know.
Yeah, shut off. Yeah. So, when Reuben describes this, and I think his analogy is good because I think it fits for us for a lot of things, but he says, he was using it for the tzitzit, but I can think of a few things that it might actually work for. He says, it's kind of like, your spouse gets into a really bad car wreck and is in the hospital with a body cast on from head to almost the end of the toe. And all that's left hanging out is the big toe. And so you as the good spouse go and you visit and you talk and you're there with that person and you can, rub on the toe and talk to them and your point of contact with this person that you care about, that you love, is their toe. Right? They're covered in a cast. It's the only way you can get to them. For a time, the only way that they could keep that commandment was to kind of hide it away until they had that opportunity, which was very little of the day. But eventually this person gets their cast off, but you've kind of forgotten that there's other ways to relate to this person other than their toe. So we go back, and Reuben, like I said, he uses this example for the tallit. And I love Reuben. I have a tallit, and I'll use it, don't get me wrong. But he says it's kind of like the cast came off, and we can relate to God. We can relate to Adonai in more ways than just that little one. But as a Jewish people, it's become so ingrained in the culture that they kind of go, hey, I've got it. And I wear my tallit with the tzitzit on it, not because I don't want to obey the commandments, but because it's kind of like that's the way that they know how to relate. And I think that I think it's just human. We tend to do this. We tend to confine ourselves and our relationship with Him and each other in boundaries and things that maybe don't have to be there. Right? Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. You guys are going to laugh at this. That's silly, but I think we see this, and so we look at these things. It's like, I'm proud to be able to wear a kippah all the time, and I do it. And I love it that anybody else wants to join me in doing it. And I'm not going to tell you anymore that, unless you're a Cohen, you don't have to wear one, absolutely. But the commandment is there. So when somebody tells me, well, there's no commandment for a kippah, it's just a tradition, I say, that's not exactly accurate either. And we want to be real careful about about how we swing that pendulum about being, so opposed to the traditions of Christianity and the traditions of Christianity being so opposed to Judaism that we miss not everything in there is bad. Not everything in the Christian tradition is bad. And we have to be careful about sorting through that and making sure that we are sifting that out correctly so that we don't throw something away that shouldn't be thrown away and we don't reject something that really shouldn't be rejected.
We've probably all had friends that have said that to us. So we don't have to do all that stuff anymore.
Right. Nailed to the cross.
Yeah, and so what I say to them, some of it doesn't pertain to me. I'm not a priest. I'm not a soldier. Or, I'm not a woman. But I can glean from those things. Why not look at it and say, out of all of this stuff, what can I do? Right. Instead of just kind of throwing it all and just saying, oh, right. God told me to do this, God does tell us how to do that. It's in His Word. He shows us how to do that.
Well, we miss out on so much, and I think, the sister here hit it when she says the Hebrew word isn't keep. Shamar means to guard. Because when we use the translation to keep the Torah, sorry, nobody's done it. Nobody has done it. If we use the translation keep, like every commandment, Yeshua couldn't do it. Think about it. Messiah was a guy. He walked the earth as a man. There were laws pertaining to women that he could not keep. But that doesn't mean he could not guard them in the Hebrew sense of the word shamar, to guard. Right? Was it last night? I was having this conversation with somebody. The rabbis would say that if you can help another individual to keep a commandment, to fulfill a mitzvah, that it was considered as if you fulfilled the mitzvah yourself. So in a Hebrew sense, Yeshua did fulfill them all. He kept them all because he guarded them all. Shamar, he guarded them. And it all fit together. And so we say, and it's kind of one of those fun things. You get to play with my Christian friends a little bit. And they're like, well, he was the only one who could keep all of the commandments. I say, no, actually, he couldn't. I need to be honorary and mess with them a little bit. At that point, it's more in fun than it is in anything else, just to try and get him to think a little bit, right? But it does happen that way. So that's kind of the arbor and where we get to it. I prepared a little bit more, and I think I'm doing okay time-wise. He's like, okay, we'll keep the next part short. It's kind of it's a blend of this week's Torah portion, part that we didn't read, and a little bit into the next one. But it was such an interesting conversation I was watching this morning on YouTube, or not YouTube, Aleph Beta, Rabbi Foreman, who Brent's mentioned before. And he was talking about the tabernacle and its similarity, and he's drawing the parallels, right? And we've talked about the tabernacle being a temple language, and garden having, Gani Dan having temple language, and in Revelation it goes back, to the garden and it's still temple language. And his comment was on comparing the tabernacle. He says it was kind of like Mount Sinai, if you think about it. And he went through a bunch of parallels. And it says, you get into the tabernacle, and you have outside around it in the courtyard, and everybody could go. And when you go back and you read about Sinai, it says everybody could get around the mountain, but you weren't allowed on it. Right? And then he says, when you get into the holy place, well, who's allowed into the holy place in the tabernacle? Not just the high priest. All the Kohanim are allowed in. Right? All of the Kohanim are allowed in. The holy place, yes. Not the most holy, but the holy place. And on Mount Sinai, he separated the priests that way as well. Then you go into the most holy place, and he says, that's kind of like the very mountaintop. Who was allowed there? Moses and Aaron. If you go back and read Sinai, Moses and Aaron were allowed. Who's allowed into the most holy place? Moses and Aaron, right? He drew other parallels. He says, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, cloud covered when God's glory is there. And if you look at Mount Sinai, it says when God's glory was there, it says the mountain was covered in cloud. Right? We have, so he described, he says, the cloud basically shows that God's glory is there by day, and His glory is in the fire by night. And here we have smoke through the temple throughout. It was just kind of interesting. And when I was looking, he says, the reason for this, and Mary made me think of this earlier when we were doing the prayers, and she says, when she says, well, we need to, pray for all the people that we say we're going to pray for, and then we kind of forget about it. I'm guilty of that. I admit it, right? I think a part of that is because we are emotional beings, right? We experience emotion and we get excited about things. And he was describing this. He was saying, even the Rambam describes the tabernacle as a portable Sinai. And so the question became, the experience at Mount Sinai. I mean, we look back at Israel and we think, man, those guys were right there, and Moses and God came down in the cloud, and how could they screw it up? I mean, how many look through the Tanakh, and how many times did they screw up? But I think it's just because we're people. And I don't know that we would be any different today if we were to be there. But we get close to that experience. I've been in places where you go and you hear a group of charity, and they're showing all the great work that they're doing and how great, and you kind of walk away thinking, man, this would be a great thing to be a part of, and maybe I can help this charity. And the longer you get from that experience, kind of the less it weighs to us, the less it kind of impacts us, or we want to react or act based on that. You guys know what I mean? You get to an exciting... I go to my classes. Jen's on me about this all the time. She goes, every time you go to class, you come back really excited. Yeah, because it's all fresh and it's right there, and the experience was amazing. And so you go to Mount Sinai, and it's like, man, this is an experience that was right there. And it's like, he's right there. God's right there. It's so close, and that intimacy and that relationship and that closeness is just there. But then you get further away. And the further away you get in either time or space, you kind of have to question, well, then what happens? I know what happens to me. I suspect it kind of happens to most people to a degree where we lose that excitement or that, what's going on? How can I be close? How can I keep that commitment to closeness? And this is where the question became, well, then how do we work to maintain that closeness? What are the things that we do? What's that? Study.
Well, it's kind of part of the purpose for Shabbat is to kind of rest and recharge.
To kind of pull back to Him, but not just to rest and to recharge, but to refresh that closeness to Him. I want it. I don't want to just come and rest. I can sit at home and rest. It's not enough to just rest in the sense of I sat around and did nothing. It's, I want that closeness. Coming around other people of like belief, right? We develop and we encourage each other so that we can go back to that remembering of, hey, this was how we came into this. I think your idea was fantastic about how did we come into this? Because it brings us back to that level of excitement that we can go, wow, you know, and it brings us up a little bit. You know, studying, prayer, song.
Almost breakfast.
The breakfast.
Shameless plug.
Shameless
Plug, the breakfast.
Tomorrow, by the way.
Well, you know, but here's the thing that I'm looking at. So, another shameless plug, right? Passover's coming up. What's Passover?
Remembering that we came out of Egypt.
Remembering that we came out of Egypt with a
As
just
slaves.
right by the hand of God Himself, and we go to Sinai. Right? And you know this, Brent's talked about it, that from Sinai forward is where you start hearing the language of marriage covenant between God and Israel. So Passover becomes what?
The wedding ring.
The anniversary. Right? Every year we celebrate it because we celebrate the anniversary. Hey, this is our connection to God. This is our binding to Him in covenant. And we're going to go back and we're going to celebrate that every year. And then every week when we have our weekly Sabbath, we get a little reminder of that. Right? All the time. It's like I want to always be reminded of my marriage to my wife. And then once a year, it's kind of, we make a little bit bigger of a deal of it to kind of commemorate that. Hey, it's been another year she's put up with me and I haven't been killed yet.
So, if we're the bride of God, and Passover is the anniversary, why are we the ones that are more likely to forget it?
What?
Why are we the ones that are more likely to forget it?
To forget what?
The anniversary. The bride is supposed to remember it. And he's supposed to forget it.
That's bad.
Wow.
That's bad.
He's not even married and he knows that.
I know.
We will flog you later.
Yes.
You'll meet him later.
What we keep hearing is for the Jews. It says time and again, I'll just start with Torah. There will be one manner of law with you as it is with those born. By the time they all got to the land, they were all called Israel. Bring out a Shah says, so now we are all Israel, heirs of the Abraham covenant. And there's neither Jew nor Gentile. I guess they think that it means, okay, so now we do things their way. But no, when you're adopted into a family, you do the things the family says. It's not, you don't bring your own jazz with you.
Yeah.
This is what, when you remind people of that. But I do have this to say, even though people can watch the people we rent from, she did tell me, I'm kind of jealous of you. Watch, but you guys keep the whole day. You always stay home all day and rest. The whole day is about Yah. It's teaching, and we try not to do any conversation that isn't about the Lord. Because it's about Him and our relationship with Him. Okay. She said, you keep the whole day. He said, we'll go on Sunday, and I go, of course, you know it's not the day. And she knows that. It was instituted from creation. This isn't a Jewish thing anyway. He sanctified that on the first week. So anyway, she goes, but then what I mean is then we go out shopping after. And I said, I used to do that. You go to church Sunday morning, then you go to Olive Garden or Red Lobster, oh my God. And then you go after that. Now, can I get it? Can I get it? That's what I used to do that.
Yes.
But it's just by the way we do it. And she sees that. And she sees we have peace in our marriage. She sees we stay out of the doctor's office. And yet, she still wants to go ahead. When I first met with her 5 years ago, she did have her Bible open every time I went to read the rant, and she asked me questions, and she started going to Sunday church. And now she likes what he says. And even though I'll point to her in the Word, and she sees we mean it, and I don't beat her over the head with it, I just do it. And I will tell you that just by that, they're convicted. You don't have to keep saying stuff to people.
Right.
They get annoyed and see you won't do the crud they do. And like when we're over there for fireworks and it's Shabbat, oh, that's right, Shabbat, we go, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and honor God on this day. I don't have to go to any 4th of July. But that can still get in their crown. That's not beating them over the head with the Torah. That's just a two-level life that can fix them. So really, I get tired of beating somebody over the head with the Torah. I've been obey God. And somebody thinks that beating them over the head with the Torah, knock yourself out, I don't answer to you. All I answer to him, further, show me the Torah where it says you have to say things in this word and that way. And what is saying the truth of love? The truth of love is saying the truth that you love somebody. And when I die, you stay on this tree. Even I like the trips, I don't want you to work with people. Okay, my truth of love is I'm willing to have you be mad because I told you the truth. But the Sunday church thinks truth and love means needy mouth, neater way of saying it. Sometimes you just have to say things the way they are because that's how God did it, that's how Yeshua did. He said it like it is. So if you're afraid, what are you afraid of saying it like it is? If a cop comes to give you a ticket and he's smiling, you're still not happy because he's giving you a ticket. He can call you ma'am and sir all he wants, but you're still pretty ticked off because he's giving you a ticket. It doesn't matter how nice he says it, please. It's that they don't want to hear it. So sometimes, in fact, 9 tenths of the time, I'll bet that's the case. Not because I didn't say it, just sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there is a fine line between like giving like an Ezekiel warning, like, hey, you know what? There's a sin. That's going on, and you know, I gotta warn you about it. Otherwise, your punishment, your blood is on my hands. But you wash yourself clean of those hands. But then you also have to think there's kind of a fine line because you know Yeshua said don't waste your time throwing pearls to swine. Right. So where does it become a warning? And then, like maybe you know, there's probably a line as far as going from warning to just dumping pearls to swine.
Well, I think that there is a part of this that becomes that's really kind of important, and I can say I've actually learned quite a lot of this one from Brent. Is that I've so far in all my conversations with people online, and I've had a lot of them, and some of them have gone for days, literally. I have yet to have one person come to the realization of Torah because of the conversation.
Excuse me.
Hang on. Without having a relationship with that individual.
But it's interesting, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The picture of your life says a lot more than 1,000 words.
I don't even say words anymore.
But and that was kind of the thing of it. It's people that we have an interaction with that we're going to have the greatest impact on. And when I use that term Torah terrorist, I'm not saying we should hide the truth or we shouldn't even speak the truth. But there are people who want to bicker over when's the new moon? Is it the crescent or is it the conjunction? Is this the new month? Is it not the new month? You're on the wrong calendar. How dare you? You didn't pronounce his name right. You're going to hell. Jesus is a pagan name. How could you even use that name anymore? Really, people? I mean, come on, let's grow up a little bit. And so, that's the kind of thing where they treat people unkindly over stuff that doesn't matter.
Does your name matter?
If you can prove the new moon stuff and that's going to make a difference in. These are arguments that have been going on for thousands of years.
Wasting your breath.
Exactly. But I've seen people
argue over the color you paint your kitchen.
But I've seen these people argue over it, and they'll tell people right to their face, "You're not saved because you've called on the wrong God." I've run into them that have told me that the word God is actually pagan. I shouldn't even be saying it. You don't understand Hebrew. Have a nice day. Right? What else do you say to this? They want to argue and argue and argue, and they're not interested in sharing truths. Because ultimately we remember, and I think she's got it, and I don't disagree with her, it's his truth, not ours. And our job is to share it in our actions first, and then if we have to use words, then those can come next. Tell you about it. Going over. Until Friday.
I was thankful for Brent. I mean, I've known this guy for 18, 19 years. Yeah. I love bacon. You know, I'm thankful that they make turkey bacon. But the first time that we met, he says, "Well, come with me tomorrow. It's Shabbat." I said, no problem. You know, we showed up, met at the Burger King parking lot, and I met him with a couple of bacon, egg, and cheese croissants. He wouldn't take one for some reason. I couldn't figure that out. Anyway, you learn the way, like you said. I mean, that's the house thing is that you do have patient, like Brent. He's been so patient, and he's really good at explaining, you know, how things are and not condemning. And I think that's an awesome attitude, you know, to have. You know, I remember where I came from, and I'm just thankful for the people that have been patient with me, including my brother. Anyway, let's turn to page 95. You join with me for the Elaine. Please stand. Together.
Before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed is He.